Well, thank you so much for being with Morning Live. The escape of rapist and murderer Thabo Bester from the Mangaung Correctional Centre in the Free State has again thrust the Correctional Services Department's facilities and security company G4S under the spotlight. Now, looking at what's happened and what goes on in prisons, generally speaking, many more questions have been raised now about what happened in this instance with Bester, where he was jailed at the Mangaung security prison. Now, award-winning investigative journalist Ruth Hopkins wrote a hard-hitting expose of the profit-driven multinational that is running Mangaung private prison, titled Misery Merchants, Life and Death in a Private Prison in South Africa. And we're also joined by the leader of the Patriotic Alliance, Gayton Mckenzie, who himself has been instrumental in exposing some of the shenanigans going on in our prison system. So Gayton and Ruth, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Welcome to both of you. Gayton, let me start with you. And I saw on social media that you actually wrote a thread of what you thought happened there, given what people were asking. And many people have turned to you, as I say, as someone who has done some exposés previously about what goes on in our prisons. But let's talk about this particular instance with Thabo Bester and how it played out. So if you will, for those who may not have seen it, run us through what you think could have happened in this instance.
Well, thank you very much, Sakina. Basically, first of all, this thing wasn't planned. Most of the planning happened outside jail, because they could plan all they like in jail, but the people that put this thing together must have been outside jail. So I think what happened there is that wardens were involved immediately. One or two prisoners might have assisted him to be on the lookout and to guard and to make sure the operation goes smoothly. And I think immediately after the killing or after the escape, that's when politicians got involved and corrupt cops got involved and corrupt politicians got involved, because there was a huge outcry. It's not the first time that we hear he's alive. And there's just nothing coming from both G4S or the correctional services. That tells me there's political maneuvering at the back. But what happened there was, the one thing that irritates me the most is the fact that, to show you that the G4S is complicit, nobody's answering the most easiest puzzle. Nobody's solving the most easiest puzzle to solve, which is this a prisoner, or is the person been killed in prison, or has he been killed outside jail? That is the easiest puzzle to solve, and no one is prepared to give that answer. And to solve that puzzle needs 3 hours of roll calling, call all the prisoners with their identity cards, and call them out in the roll call. And the moment you find out there's a prisoner missing, then you know that it's most likely the prisoner has been killed. The moment you find out all prisoners are there, that tells you that the body has been brought in. A lot of money and a lot of planning has got into this, and it involves 3 spheres, which is the corrupt politicians, corrupt cops, actually 4 corrupt wardens, and prisoners that is involved. You can't do something like that in any prison without the numbers gang knowing. So there must have been prisoners also involved.
So this, of course, the scenario that you paint speaks to the body that was found, because initially, when that fire was reported in Thabo Bester's cell and a body was discovered, it was thought that he had committed suicide somehow and set himself alight. But then when it was found that the body through DNA did not match that of the markers on the woman who claimed to be Thabo Bester's mother, I mean, that's when one would imagine correctional services would have gone into full drive to investigate what actually happened. But here we sit several months later, and the Correctional Services Department over the weekend releases a statement saying that they are investigating. Why haven't they yet found some of the basic answers, is what South Africans are asking. But I want to come to you, Ruth, with regard to some of the work that you did at Mangaung Private Prison, and work that spans over a decade, where you did some serious investigations. Just paint a picture for us of this facility and, of course, the people who run it.
Well, I mean, first of all, people dying in that prison is not a thing that's uncommon or unheard of. I mean, in my book, Misery Merchants, I document a case of a prisoner who was actually tortured to death in the prison by G4S, and then they registered it as a suicide to cover up their deeds. And DCS never held them accountable. And so there was widespread torture going on in the prison through the use of electroshocks, but also through the use of forced injections with antipsychotic drugs. People were dying. There was corruption. It was a terrible hellhole of a place, to be honest.
And of course, it would seem as though it is still going on by all accounts. Gayton, as someone who's been on the inside, talk to us. You know, the role of a company like G4S, who have a terrible reputation globally, but what goes on a daily basis in these prisons? As Ruth says, it's not uncommon to hear of people dying and sometimes being tortured to death.
Everything that Ruth tells you, it's absolutely the truth. You know, the problem that the government officials, and particularly the politicians, are sitting with is that the contract of G4S should have been stopped a long time ago. But the problem when you take upfront bribes and when you've been paid, you can't act against the people. If somebody builds a bridge and they pay you a bribe and they do substandard work, you can't really raise your voice because they'll tell you, but what do you mean? We're in this together. G4S, this is a perfect opportunity, one, for the contract to be stopped immediately. Prisoners do die in that prison. Two, and this for me is probably one of the most important things, is the fact that these people are scared of what this whole saga, the Thabo Bester saga, will bring out. There's a lot more because the spotlight is now on them and they hate that. That's why they say nothing and they're silent. And you ask yourself, why is DCS speaking? And they should be speaking. And I think that's a question we should all be asking. They should be speaking and having press conferences and face the media, which means the communities. What they are doing is that it is so expensive. I think the money that the government is spending on this private prisons, for prisoners to be tortured, for prisoners to be given antipsychotic drugs, for prisoners to be killed, it's just madness. And we've been saying for the past 20 years that the reason why only 80% to 90% of, 10% of people that murder people cannot be found, or 90% of cases cannot be solved, is because some of these killers are behind bars and wardens get paid and to take out these prisoners and bring them back after killing. And that's basically a 0.1% chance that they will be arrested. This is a chance for the President Cyril Ramaphosa, to step up and to say, I'm going to have a full-blown independent people, not you can't have the wardens investigating themselves. It is so easy, Sakina, it's so easy to solve this Thabo Bester saga, because there's just 4 points you look at. Number one, you look at the roll call, as I said. Number two, you look at who signed out for the master key, because you can't pull this off without the master key. And at every particular time in prison, somebody must sign for the master key. And thirdly, you just check who was working at the gate and who was working in that particular area and why was the cameras not working. Those are the things, those are basic things. This thing is not as difficult, but South Africa is going to be shocked with the names that's going to come out of here. The fact that this man was walking around in Woolworths tells you that he had political cover. We need to know who those politicians are. But what's going to happen in South Africa, the next headline you're going to see regarding this issue is that Thabo Bester is dead, Dr. Nandipa is dead, because they are going to be killed by the very same people that they paid.
Well, one would want to think that, this is just listening to some movie script, but unfortunately it is real life. You talk, Gayton, about people who are being taken out of prison to go and commit crime and then returned. And we heard that evidence led at the Zondo Commission. I remember listening to a portfolio committee briefing once where the police and IPID were in some sort of turf war at OR Tambo. But during that same portfolio committee meeting, there was talk about a KGB Sitole, and a man who was supposed to be in prison finds himself not in prison, but actually running a unit of the South African Police Service and being, tasked to go to Mangaung with millions of rands to, the allegation is, buy votes. This came out of a portfolio committee meeting, so it's not as though the authorities don't know what's going on. But, Ruth, you also spoke about your 10 years. It took you a whole decade to get some of the evidence that goes into your book. It's been thoroughly researched. But you've also come under attack from some of these companies' agents, G4S. They have threatened you directly and indirectly. And obviously, as Gayton says, there must be some very powerful people politically connected behind this as well. But let's talk about G4S a little more. They are, they've run into scandal after scandal, not only in South Africa, but elsewhere in the world as well.
Yeah, actually, their track record here in the UK, where I'm currently based, is much worse because they run many more prisons here, about 4 or 5. And Medway Prison and Brookhouse Detention Centre, there was a detention centre for migrants, came into the news because of abuse, racism, neglect. It was terrible. And then Birmingham Prison in 2018, just like Mangaung Prison, was taken back from G4S because they lost control because of riots and disturbances, and the state took it back. But if you look all over the world, G4S keeps running into problems. People keep dying in their care. I mean, there's a very famous case here of Jimmy Mubenga, an Angolan asylum seeker who was choked to death by G4S. And however, they keep landing contract after contract after contract. It's sort of capitalism at its best, that profit just drives everything. Human rights are completely secondary. And I really don't understand, as Gayton was saying, how come G4S still have the prison contract in South Africa? As you said, for 10 years, I documented torture, abuse, corruption, all these irregularities, really severe, serious human rights violations that any other company, any other country, any other situation should lead to the end. To the end of this contract. There should be some accountability, and yet they just keep going. It's business as usual.
And, if you will, Ruth, just indulge us for a second and maybe share with us, some of the cases that stand out for you. You've just spoken about the prisoner who was choked to death. What are some of the others, just to give our viewers a sense of some of the grave atrocities that take place in these centres?
Well, there was another death, because I heard about a lot of deaths happening in that prison, but I wrote about 2 cases that I could corroborate. And there was one case of an inmate with epilepsy, and he was electroshocked, which brought on a fit, and that turned out to be a fatal fit. His cellmate pressed the panic button, and nobody came. And again, G4S covered this up, registered it as a natural death, and didn't tell the family what had actually happened. And also, I spoke to a guy called James Motulwe, and he was the most severe case I came across with the forced injections. So they forcibly injected prisoners with antipsychotic drugs, and this man had been forcibly injected over a period of 3 years every week. For no apparent reason, was not a person with mental illness, had no doctor's declaration or whatever. He was just injected again and again and again, and he had damage to his nervous system. He couldn't speak clearly. He couldn't hold his neck up straight. He stumbled around. He was kind of stupefied. And there are many other cases of inmates who've been injected, beaten up, arms broken, legs broken. When just before DCS took over the prison, G4S supervisors shot at close range rubber bullets and made an inmate blind in one eye. Again, this was covered up. The inmate himself tried to report it to the police. However, he ended up being charged and ending up before the judge for malicious damage to property, but his injury was just covered up and hidden. Yeah, so there's the treatment of men in that prison has just been horrific.
And Gayton, you know, you spoke at some point about the thing that really touched your heart and soul, that was an epiphany for you that happened in prison. You spoke of the rape of a 14-year-old. Talk to us about this, because, you know, listening to what Ruth is saying and your own, you know, experience of what goes on in these centers, people go in there sentenced for crimes and they are supposed to be rehabilitated in these centers, but that's not quite what happens.
Right. Now, what basically, you know, I remember when GS4 got the contract, just before they got the contract, when people were still, when this thing was still advertised, we were told that this is a model prison. We were told that there's cameras. We were told that this will be the rehabilitation, that will be rehabilitation centers. This thing was sold as the best prison in the world. What we have now is a concentration camp. That's what it is. There's no better way to describe. This is a Nazi concentration camp that that you see in Mangaung. There's no other way to describe it. You know, prisoners can sometimes be very brutal towards each other. There's rapes happening in jail. There's murder happening amongst prisoners, and that is kind of expected from the different prisons prisoners because of gang affiliation. But don't expect wardens to be part of the killings. We don't expect wardens to be part of this gang activity, and that's what's happening. Worse than that, we don't expect the institution of government to cover this up. You ask yourself, why? What have they done for 7 months since the escape to now? What have they done? They've done nothing because they are complicit. And that's why I'm calling the president out. I said, come and, you know, this cannot be business as usual. This is business unusual. The DCS needs to take back that contract. We need to get to the bottom of this. There's people watching this that has lost family members that still that want answers. And those answers are right there after the Thabo Bester saga. I mean, this is like a movie. And it's one thing and the people are shocked. If you go in the prison and there's a full-blown investigation, what you're going to discover people, as Rusa said, that's normal, healthy people walking out of there being mentally ill, coming out of the jail. You're going to get young children going out of there, coming out killing people because they're angry with society. You know, you go in there and you've stolen a bread, you come out there knowing how to rob bakery. There's nothing of substance that they are doing. But I want to say to every South African listening here is that we should not let this go. This cannot be just another headline, and when the headlines move away, you had a person dying in jail, being killed. And this was, I mean, you know, I was saying on my thread yesterday that when you burn, a few years ago, the prison burned, and there's a lot of, some prisoners started a fire with a blanket, and there was a lot of prisoners dying in that instance. This was such a controlled fire. It was such a controlled fire. And when you burn a body, it's not a 2-minute thing. You know, they are timed, these people, number one. Number two, smoke inhalation, the prisoners could have died, and that didn't happen. It shows you that this wasn't one man. To carry a body around in jail, it's not an easy feat. There's so many eyes. There's so many cameras. What happened? We need to know that. And the first step to show seriousness is suspend everybody that was on duty and investigate. Suspend everybody. And secondly, you know, wardens, it's 0.1% of wardens that are corrupt to the core. And the reason why those people are being called out because they are part of the gangs. And if the warden or the honest wardens speak up or speak out, then the very same gangsters in jail will then kill those wardens or step those honest wardens. So people shouldn't paint all wardens with this brush.
Right, let's just quickly wrap up that conversation with Gayton Mckenzie and, of course, do we have another story? No, we're going to this one. The escape of a rapist and murderer, Thabo Bester, from the Mangaung Correctional Centre in the Free State, which has, of course, thrust that facility and the security company G4S in the spotlight once again. Now, we are in conversation with investigative journalist Ruth Hopkins and Gayton Mckenzie, the leader of the DA. And thanks so much to both of you for your patience. I just want to give both of you an opportunity just to round it up for us. And also, if you can, in doing so, touch for us on the issue that Gayton mentions, Ruth, about the wardens at this facility and perhaps other facilities, because you also in your book spoke about the measly salaries that they earn and how this could be a possible contributor to what is going on.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think the guards in the prison are equally victimized by the company and the government as the imprisoned men are. Because, yeah, they're overworked and underpaid and subjected to massive, big security risks. They work in a very dangerous environment and not protected, not heard. I mean, for example, there are ceramic toilet pots in the prison, and prisoners break them and use the shards as weapons. And so the guards have been asking for years, can you please replace these toilet pots with cast iron ones? And G4S has refused because it costs money. So yeah, there's a problem there. And I mean, I've been investigating this for 10 years, and I've written articles and articles, and I've written a book, I've worked on a film. I've even set up an international network of investigative journalists who are looking at G4S in other countries. And I see zero accountability. I don't see South Africa acting on this, on these crimes, honestly, that I've exposed. There's just been zero accountability for the company, the government. All it's doing, all I can see that it's doing is it's covering up and filling its pockets. And, you know, there was the Bosasa inquiry, and I hope the same thing can happen for G4S, that the people not just responsible for Thabo Bester's escape, because that is just a symptom of a deeper disease, you know. And I think the entire company needs to be held accountable, not just individuals. And how come they still have the contract?
All right. And your final word, Gayton?
Well, just to make a correction, you said leader of the DA. I'm leader of the PA.
Oh, the PA. Apologies. The Patriotic Alliance.
I'm confused by people.
That's just the slip.
Yeah, so I know. You know, I went on a tour to the UK, a prison tour. I was invited to go speak to prisoners in the UK, in Germany, Namibia. In every place where I get to, where G4S is there, GS4, they would close that prison and not want me to get in, although I was invited, traveling the world, because it's like a secret society of that concentration camp called the prisoner. They are scared of scrutiny. So when I was invited, particularly to the UK, they were like, no, but Mckenzie cannot come here. While I was visiting prisoners freely, that's number one. So people need to look into that place. And I'm glad that Ruth is written about that. Secondly, you know, in America, the FBI would use hackers, old hackers, to catch new hackers. Car places like BMW and Mercedes, I know for a fact, they would use old car thieves to help them make locks that you cannot break into. Terrorism gets fought together with old repentant terrorists. Why is it that the South African government is so scared to use ex-prisoners to help them to fix this mess? Because it's ex-prisoners and prisoners that are blowing the whistle on these things. So my last shot to the president of this country is that it doesn't need to be me, because politically we are rivals, but there's a lot of decent, well-meaning ex-prisoners that can help with this investigation, because you have to understand the prison system to get to the bottom of this. You can get the best member of the Hawks. He's going to get there, they're going to dribble him. They're going to dribble him. You need somebody that shows him, ask this, look that, and assist him. So that's my plea to the president today. You can use, it doesn't need to be me, because of political reasons, I know how you guys think, but get ex-prisoners to get to the bottom of this matter. Within a week, we will know who's involved, what happened, and that's my last shot. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gayton Mckenzie, leader of the Patriotic Alliance, the PA, and award-winning investigative journalist Ruth Hopkins, who wrote a hard-hitting expose of the profit-driven multinationals running the Mangaung private prison titled The Misery Merchants, Life and Death in a Private South African Prison.